Hello, one and all, and welcome to the podcast we call the Fantastival with myself, Steve Nussbaum, in the podcast where I invite my guests to come on and talk to me all about their musical tastes, their memories, their experiences, and they get to collect their fancy festivals, which I have christened Fantastivals. We are now on episode number 108. October is almost done, and I hope everyone who's listening has a great Halloween this week. And I must say, before we start this one, a massive thank you to Ian and John from Gallagher's Green in the last episode. They were absolutely superb, and another example of the new music that is available out there. There's so much talent out there, so please, if you haven't done so already, go and listen to their Fantastival podcast. It was a pleasure to have both of those gentlemen on. So that was 107. Like I said, this is 108, and this week I'm delighted to have this gentleman on the Fantastival podcast. His name has been mentioned quite a few times to me, and I finally got him on. So ladies and gentlemen, it's the wonderful, it's Mr. Simon Peck.
Thank you very much, Steve. And hopefully when my name's been mentioned, it's only been in a good way.
I'm sure those ears have been burning. Simon, I'm so glad, like I said, to have you on. Before we talk about music, I always like to check in with my guests to find out how they've been. It's been a strange 2 years, 3 years now. So Simon, mate, how have you been?
Excellent. Absolutely excellent. And I think when the world's so absolutely appalling, there's only one way to go, really, and that's top your glass up, make sure it's always half full, because pretty much every day for a couple of years, as with everyone, I wake up in the morning and think something or someone's gonna kick me in the privates at some point today, so I'll be ready for it.
So I obviously know you through the HOV connection. I'm sure a lot of listeners will know you or know of you, but for anyone who's listening who doesn't know about the man, the myth, the legend of Simon Peck, or Pecky as you're well known, tell us a bit more about yourself. Who is Simon Peck?
Simon Peck, yeah, born in Bradford a very long time ago. Got my second or third job was probably Christmas temp at HMV in Bradford on Broadway. It's now been knocked down, sadly. The manager there at the time was Liz Hills, was it? And and the assistant manager was a guy called Phil Peppert, who you might remember from your Oxford Street days, Steve, I'm guessing.
I worked with him in Ops. He was in Ops when I started. The legend that's Phil Peppert. Yeah, absolutely.
The legend, yeah. Good friend of mine, and he ended up being the manager of Bradford. Then he went to Chester, and a guy called Dave Pride gave me a job to move over to Chester, and I was the number 3, as they used to call us back then. And since then, everyone just calls me a number 2, a big number 2. But back then, the team leader was one step below assistant manager, and they kept bringing in other assistant managers, even though I'd moved all the way from Bradford to Chester to work with Phil Peppert, which is no easy task. People thought I was hard work to be a boss. They needed to spend a few months working for Phil Peppert, if you ask me, and I always used to tell people that. But fantastic guy, great guy, lovely guy. Many hours and hours in a pub listening to him, telling me stories and getting on really well with him, and then the next day turning up at 7:31 a.m. and him saying, "Where the fucking hell have you been? It's well past 7." Well, to be honest, I don't start getting paid till 9. But them are the days, Steve. You remember them well, when the clock literally just had hours on it, and most of them were either in an H&B shop working early and late, and or in a pub somewhere straight afterwards. So they were great days. He's a great guy. And 1988, I think, might have been my first Christmas, but I'm not 100% sure. Memory fades when you're 50 odd. But 1988. And then went everywhere: Chester, Preston, Liverpool, all over the place, really, with HMV. Wherever they told me to go, I used to go. Manchester for quite a long time. The small Manchester shop, the big Manchester shop, Liverpool, Preston, back to Liverpool, Blackpool, back to Liverpool again as manager, and so I moved about quite a bit. But so my life really revolved around work, pubs, and the odd girlfriend, and ended up with 4 kids and no long-term relationship at the end of it, because I was mostly at work or in the pub through those years. But there you go. So, you realise that perhaps you could re-look at your priorities, but anything's easy with the benefit of hindsight, right?
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, We loved it. It was just a great place to work. If you weren't going to be a rock star or a footballer or a rocket scientist, I always just think working in a record shop was the next best thing.
And you worked there during, I would say, a golden age. Certainly, I look back on that period as a golden age between, like you said, you started in '88 and were there throughout the '90s. Some amazing albums released through the '90s. What was it like, I guess, to work in a record shop at that time? What do you remember of key moments that you look back on? I always remember working in Oxford Street when Coldplay Parachutes came out and the Strokes' Is This It came out, and thinking at the time, this feels like quite a big moment for certain bands and acts. What about you?
Yeah, similar really. There were all those times. I mean, for me, the noughties was sort of taken up with the Oasis phenomenon, if I'm honest, from about '94 onwards. But certainly, the '90s. Certainly the back end of the '80s. I remember my first ever interview for that Christmas temp job in Bradford. The people there, I can't remember what's it called? Alan Thompson was the regional manager, and Liz interviewed me and said, will the staff downstairs know that you buy records from here? And I said, no, probably not. And they said, all right, why not? Are you not into music? I said, yeah, I'm massively into music, but there's 7 different record shops in Bradford. There's 2 or 3 really great independents. Woolworths obviously sold records at that time. Boots sold records at that time. HMV, there was a 2-hour prices and an hour price video. So it was kind of... W.H. Smith sold a lot of records, and sometimes you had to go somewhere else to get what you wanted. I said, and also, if I'm not buying a 12-inch single, I'm buying a tape. So then, okay, then what was the last thing you bought? I can't remember what the last thing I said I bought was, but it might have been some Blue Tone compilation. And only because I'd seen an ad in the NME, I was into the Beat and the Specials earlier on in the 80s, and yeah, so I think, and then I remember when CDs first came out, which was a pretty pivotal moment, and there weren't a lot of CDs in stock, and I could never afford one of those early CD players, but I was a massive Style Council fan, and they released quite a few EPs on CD and not on record, so there were a couple of B-sides, sort of compilations with 4 or 5 tracks on a 5-inch CD, and it was just a different world. At that time, there was let's have a guess, 30 foot of tapes, 150 foot of albums on vinyl, and maybe one overhead in a 5-foot bay of whatever CDs were available, and that was it for CDs. So that was probably the big moment really, and I guess looking back through the history of HMV, for me, Steve, it was that understanding when you got further up the, whatever they call it, a ladder or pyramid or whatever people call it, up into the ivory tower, as was, you realise that the growth in HMV shops, really astounding what Brian McLaughlin did for that business when he started out. I think there must have been 20-30 shops, got up to maybe 50 or 60, maybe a bit more. Then CD came out around about that time when I started, and it just grew and grew and grew and grew and grew, and more people transferred to tapes, to CDs from vinyl, and vinyl slowly dwindled, and it really, I think HMV did a better job than all the competition in terms of new racking for CDs and expanding footage for CDs and growing with that music market, which was just fantastic for the industry, wasn't it? When you look at it and go, geez, everybody's buying all their records again on CD, and all of a sudden vinyl's not worth a lot. The sales were full of vinyl and cutouts from those companies over in Holland. I can't remember what they're called now, sound and media type companies, and you think the sale people and the boxes are full of tapes and vinyl, and looking back on it now, there's those cutouts that weren't meant to be sold in the UK, and for whatever reason, and you think, geez, that's because a CD was a tenner, and a sale album. Even I remember buying Led Zeppelin's Song Remains the Same double vinyl album from HMV in a sale for $4.99. So it's half the price of any chart CD for a God, they were the days. If only I could go back in time and buy them all and sell them now, I'd be a multi-billionaire by the end of the year, wouldn't I? Because that's the way the market goes. But yeah, and then again later on, was it 96 and onwards when DVD came into play, a similar growth. So going from 50, 60, 70 stores very quickly up to 150, and then from 150 up to the 250 or whatever that we got to with off the back of DVD. It was kind of 10 very definitive growth years in terms of, you know, new formats and HMV being, you know, latching onto them the quickest, I guess. And, you know, another 10 years after that, probably, as everyone would say, God, who were the directors at HMV when everyone started streaming music and everyone... What were they doing? You know, why didn't they sell more online? And, you know, there's no... It's again, everything's easy to verify. So I look back and I think some of this criticism's pretty unfair, really, because at the time we were selling stuff online and, you know, not making any money from it. And what we were selling online was still a decent market share, 30-40% market share of online sales of physical product, music or film, but was certainly, you know, not the not the gold at the end of the rainbow as far as the business was concerned. And it happened so quickly. And there's lots of things, when looking back, it'd be easy to say we should have never let Play.com come into our market. We should have never let Amazon come into our market to the extent that they did so quickly. But those guys were selling the stuff that we sold as our bread and butter at a margin in our stores, our store estate, for a loss. So no businessman would go, do you know what, this is the new thing. Instead of making money out of selling the product that we love in our stores, that we've got 250 of by now, let's turn all those taps off, sell everything online at a loss under the HMV brand, and not allow Play.com into the market, not allow Amazon. Brilliant. And can you imagine what everyone in the stores would have said if your customers were going into a shop and saying, I could buy this for $9.99 on HMV.com, but you're selling it for $14.99. Yeah, that's because they're competing with Amazon and Play, right? So should I just buy it online? Yeah, if you want it for that price. what are you going to do? And from a streaming point of view, you know, that was what I wasn't around really at the time. It was just bubbling under, but it was kind of, you were talking about whatever Pirate Bay, and you were talking about streaming movies, and all the data that we had was stuff like, you know, the baud rate will never be sufficient for people to stream movies live in the UK because the capacity internet-wise will never be that good, and it certainly will never be that good to be able to stream games. There's no chance it's going to happen in your lifetime. But I guess, you know, people were saying there's no chance in our lifetime that we'll have a prime minister who lasts the same length of time as Brian Clough at Leeds United. So, but who knows?
I like the way you got Leeds United in there. Lovely
You've
stuff.
You've got to get Leeds United in somewhere, haven't you? No, I mean, it's probably the only place you're going to get Leeds United in it these days. I think even the nightclubs in Leeds turn the players away when they turn up. At the moment.
So Simon, you've already mentioned some amazing acts already and a great view of your time at HMV. But in terms of your own musical taste, what kind of music are you into?
I keep going back to the glory days. When I first started at HMV, I was a bit cocky and thought, I know more about music than anybody else I know. And within an hour on the counter, when people are asking you those music questions, you think, God, I know absolutely F all about music. And you realise that very quickly when you stood behind a counter in a music shop, don't you? And but what a great education it is over the years, you know. I would have heard of the Beach Boys when I started there in 1988. Within 6 months of starting there, I was staying behind after work, don't tell anyone, and taping every single Beach Boys album, and became a lifelong fan of the Beach Boys. I would have never have listened to country music in any way, shape or form. But when Graham Davison plays Nancy Griffith late night at the Grand Hotel or Grand Opry, was it? Album, non-stop all day, interspersed with at lunchtime Steve Earle, Copperhead Road. You've got to develop an appreciation in between thinking, God, I hate this stuff. I wish I could just listen to New Order, Depeche Mode, and the Pet Shop Boys at the time, I think, instead. But you develop this appreciation. And back years earlier, you go from school days. I started off as a Jam fan, a mod. I was into ska music. I was into the beat and the Coventry stuff. I was into all of that really cool stuff. And then when your group of friends changes, I got into metal. Everyone's got to have a serious metal phase, and I certainly did. And I consumed metal like it was, Cocoa Pops. I absolutely loved metal for years and years and years. And I can remember thinking when I was a kid, maybe 13, thinking, oh, I'm really sad. The new Kiss album's out, and if I live to be 70 and they only release one new album every 2 years, I'll only ever be able to hear another 30 Kiss albums in my lifetime. How sad is that?
Love it.
I genuinely remember thinking, it's going to be awful if they only release one album every 2 years. It's just, what a weird thing to think. And but yeah, massive Maiden fan, new wave of British heavy metal, Saxon, all that stuff. And then it comes back round, so then got weaned off metal through bands like Spear of Destiny and some of the post-punk stuff and New Order, and then got into Depeche Mode, and then from that got into early hip-hop and loved all that early hip-hop, the real Roxanne, Ice-T, all of that stuff. I remember when NWA came out and LL Cool J, I was a massive fan of that stuff. And then sort of conversely, what most people would say, got into the Clash off the back of listening to hip-hop, I think, not the other way around, because the Clash, I wouldn't have listened to them when they were around the first time, because I was a Jam fan, and you just don't do that when you're 10 or 11 years old. But yeah, so my first, I remember I got a ticket to go see the Jam in Leeds, and it ended up being their last ever gig, certainly in Leeds it was, on that last tour. But my mum wouldn't let me go because it was too far to travel, Bradford to Leeds, about 12 miles, I think, off the top of my head. But yeah, I wasn't allowed to go, so I had to sell my last ever
no way.
ticket to see the Jam. I had to sell it. And so I ended up, the first ever concert I went to was 1983 or 2 maybe. 83 it must have been, because I was into metal by then. So my first ever gig was Kiss at the Queen's Hall in Leeds. Also knocked down now. But the first tour they did without the makeup, Lick It Up. If anyone wants to listen to it, fantastic album. Lick It Up. Oh, ho, ho. Well before, Crazy, Crazy, Crazy Nights. But mad into all those live Kiss albums, Alive 1, Alive 2. Just remember looking at the covers, sitting with the vinyl lonely in my bedroom on my rubbish record player, listening to metal albums and the lyrics and, remembering who took the photos on the Iron Maiden shoots on the back of their albums, who wrote the copy in terms of what was on the back, and who designed the lyrics and the typeset, who not just Derek Riggs who drew Eddie on all those fabulous covers, but what a great time to be alive. Anyway, sorry, come back to school days then. Did you want me to start when I was born, Steve, or should we just...
This is your life, Simon Peck. This is your life.
Swiftly to work life, yeah. So I think the last 2 tapes I bought before I got a job in HV were probably on the same day, Elvis Costello's Spike and New Order, Technique. I think I bought them both the same day. I think they came out roughly the same time. But those were the days when you used to save up your 50p a week spending money. And your milk crown money to buy an album that you've been dying to get. And I always, my analogy with the world these days in terms of online dating, say, I always think that's very much like the consumption of music these days, where I've not saved up for long. I can get everything I want for free, so why would I bother listening to a full album when I can just listen to a song once and then listen to another one?
Yeah.
I don't have to phone someone's mum up and ask if I can go and meet them for a date and put all that effort in and buy flowers and cards or any of that. I can literally just download a song. And that's a shame for me in terms of the way people consume music. And I don't think it's helped anyone really. And I think that's why when I buy vinyl now and I'm investing that much money in it these days, I always like to think, I won't tend to buy vinyl from new music artists because I think it's an investment. And most of the vinyl I buy is stuff that I've probably had repossessed over the years that I used to own. So just building my collection back up. but yeah, different. A whole world's changed. But yeah, so what sort of music? First ever. I thought you were supposed to ask me first ever single when I was doing my revision.
It's coming. It's coming. You're skipping ahead.
All right, so I'll wait for that then.
Yeah, wait for that. Before I ask you that, you've mentioned what you were listening to when you started at HMV.
Yeah, and it's not changed. I still listen to the real Roxanne and LL Cool J most days. No, I'll tend to listen to new music, but these days, sadly, it's a bit, well, since I stopped buying the NME, since Q disappeared, and since I don't have time to scroll through all the YouTubers and TikTok videos and stuff, and I wait until one of my 4 kids recommends something. Usually my oldest boy, Alex, who's a big music fan, lovely guy, and he helps me. So not because he wants to help me, because I'm an invalid or anything, and I'm too decrepit and old, but just because we have this shared interest. So he'll occasionally send me stuff, and some of the stuff he sent me over the years I've really got into, whether it's, he'll send me a track by Fontaine's DC or the DMCs, and that's just, people with a D in their name. But yeah, so and he moved to London a couple of years ago. He's moved back up to Manchester now, just recently. But I wanted to take him to the 100 Club, and I was telling him about the Clash and how they were called the 101ers, and he loved it. And we went and we saw a band called Opus Kink, who were going to make it onto my lineup, but didn't in the end. But absolutely fantastic. So I will listen to anything as long as it's got a beat and I can hear a chorus and a melody. So if it's Brian Eno or Can, probably not for me. If it's Echo and the Bunnymen or the Arctic Monkeys or New Order, that's my thing, really. I like a song with a lyrical meaning. I like a song with a really lovely melody. I like the instrumentation. But I'll listen to dance music. I'll listen to funk. I'll listen to, like I say, hip hop quite a bit. I'll listen to everything. And if anything comes out and it's really, really popular, I'll eventually get around to listening to it, whether that be Ed Sheeran or whoever. There's a time and place for them. And you mentioned Coldplay earlier, Steve, didn't you? And I sometimes those sort of bands have bypassed me for whatever reason, but then I'll go back to them, and once I've gone back to them and find something that I love, I'll have to then consume it and listen to everything and train spot every album, because I'm a bit like that, really. So I'm not really listen to a song once and throw it away. If I listen to a song once and love it, I'd then have to do a load of research and find out everything else that guy or that girl's ever been involved in and listen to it.
I love it. So now's your time to talk about the first record, Simon. So let me take you back. I won't ask the year, but let's go back in time when I'm sure your hair is probably as good as what it is now. You've maintained that beautifully.
Yeah,
Simon.
Yeah. I've done my best. It's had a lot of punishment as well. It's been peroxide blonde when I was into Spirit Destiny. It's been a curly mop top. I was going to say when I was into Simply Red, but it was never ginger. Sorry about that. So yeah, it's had a lot of punishment, but it's still there, and I'm really pleased, really thankful to have hair, unlike most of my friends, with the exception of Neil Taylor, to be fair, because he's got lovely hair as well still.
Yeah. He was
first single that I ever got bought for me was, and this is interesting because the other week my eldest son, who's moved up to Manchester, was talking about they'd been out for a drink in Ancoats, so I started singing it, and he said, "What the F is that, Dad?" And I said, "It's Matchstark Men and Matchstark Cats and Dogs by Brian and Michael, I think it was." And he said, "It's ridiculous." So that was the first 7-inch single I ever got bought for me. I said, and 2 years later, when my granddad had saved up to buy me another 7-inch single for Christmas, I got Boney M, Rivers of Babylon, B-side, Mary's Boy Child, or double A side, whatever it was. So so Pictures, not Pictures of Matchstick Men, that's the quote song, isn't it? Matchstark Men and Matchstark Cats and Dogs, fabulous song. I won't sing it for you, but my son did send me a video of him singing it with his new flatmate and loving it, really. So you're looking at me as if you don't remember it, and I'm thinking you're probably not old enough to remember it, are you?
I don't remember it, but like I say on this podcast, there's no such thing as a guilty pleasure. It's just pleasures.
Well, my son actually did a bit of research and told me it was number one for like 6 weeks or something. It's about L.S. Lowry, you know, the painter?
Yeah.
Who's topical, actually, because last week I think there's a picture he did of people going to the match, and I think it sold for £9.5 million or something. In fact, there's a film available with him. Timothy Spall plays L.S. Lowry, and all he painted was Matchstick Men and Matchstark Cats and Dogs. Kids on the corner of the street sparking clogs.
It feels like it's meant to be to have you on the podcast at this moment in time.
And apologies, listeners, if you've switched off now. I'm going to stop talking about that song.
So the Mr. Peck, this podcast is all about people coming on, collating their fantasy festivals. Are you a fan of festivals? Have you been to many?
Yes. Well, used to be a regular visitor to the Leeds Festival, and prior to that, when it was not part of the Reading Festival, used to be at Temple Newsom. I used to go every single year. Glastonbury '97, best ever gig, Radiohead, absolutely fantastic show, like living in the Somme without the bombs, but fab, incredible weekend. The Prodigy, Radiohead, just a great time to be alive, really. Seahorses, I remember, on a tent somewhere around the back of the stage. What else? Can't remember them all now, but Radiohead would definitely highlight. Absolutely amazing gig. But so yeah, I did go to quite a lot of festivals. Lovely little festival up in Bingley that I went to this year, which is near Bradford. Yeah, absolutely brilliant. Yeah, Rag and Bone Man. But prior to that, we had Peter Hook and the Light did most of the Joy Division hits and New Order hits in an hour-long set, middle of the afternoon in the sunshine with his shorts on, singing badly, and finished with the Pixies on the Sunday night. I think it was Libertines the Saturday night, maybe. Rag and Bone Man was the headline on the Friday night, and the Pixies on the Sunday. Lovely little venue, just a rugby club, not too many people, not too busy, no trouble, just a great 2 or 3 days out. So yeah, that was the last festival I went to, I think. I did have tickets for Leeds this year, but didn't bother going in the end because I thought it's probably not for me or people my age.
Even I feel old watching Leeds and Reading. That's the one that I look at nowadays. It was so good back in the day, and you look at some of the old festival lineups and you're like, it's incredible. But I look at it now and I'm a bit past it now, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, and I felt like that for maybe 5 or 6 years ago when I last went was Eminem was headlining, and it was brilliant, and Eminem was fantastic, and Dido came out, and it was just a great show. But prior to Eminem, I think Chase and Status were on, and there were all these younger people, I used to be young ones, singing Chase and fucking Status, Chase and fucking Status in my face as I was stood having my last beer before I walked out to see Eminem. So, yeah, I thought at that point I'm probably getting too old for this, but yeah.
And I bet you've been to many gigs, but do you have a favourite gig, or do you have favourite gigs?
I go to a gig probably a minimum once every 2 weeks. I'll go to whatever's on. So and certainly after COVID, when my inbox kept filling up with, did you know that this artist is playing there? And as soon as they opened up again, I just went absolutely crazy, and then ended up by the time it got to last summer, I was like, I'm going to 3 or 4 gigs every week here, and I'm absolutely shattered, and I've got no time to do anything else. So I went a bit crazy, because you don't quite look at your diary, you just think, oh right, New Order are playing the Peace Hall in Halifax, so click 2 tickets for that, and then by the time it gets around it, I'm like, I've got New Order on the Thursday night, Manic Street Preachers on the Saturday night, and then it's just insane. But yeah, so I will go a lot of gigs. I do go a lot of gigs. Next one, funny enough, is the Blow Monkeys next week for my birthday. One after that might be Ocean Colour Scene. So yeah. Oh, Kirk Brandon in between from Spirit Destiny's doing a solo acoustic affair in Bradford. And the next week or two, I've got tickets for Spirit Destiny a few weeks after that, because he literally relentlessly tours. And I try and go see him every single time. I just love him. Paul Weller I've seen this year, Noel Gallagher I've seen this year, Duran Duran I've seen this year, don't ask why. Yeah, so been a busy old summer for gigs.
Great stuff. So the aim of the podcast, like I said, is getting our guests to collect their fantasy festivals. So Simon gets to choose any 5 acts, one of who must play one of their studio albums in full, and Simon gets to pick an encore, which all 5 acts can perform together at the end of his fantasy festival, which is a song by anyone ever. So it's very simple. 5 acts take 5 time slots. So I mentioned Ian and John from Gallagher's Green. I had them on in the last episode. They collated their G-Spot Fantasy Festival in the last episode. In the opening act, they went for themselves. So we had Gallagher's Green make their Fantastival debut. Super Seconds, they went for Tom Meehan from Kasabian as a solo act. And for the Midway Madness, they went for Kasabian, who got their first pick of being a fantasy festival artist. Pre-headline act was Manic Street Preachers, and their headline act was Guns N' Roses. And for their encore, they got a double header away because there was two of them. So they went for Heroes by David Bowie and Champagne Supernova, that they had all their 5 acts picked. So it's very simple, very straightforward. 5 acts, 5 time slots. But before we talk about your acts, Simon, or acts who are gonna miss out on your fantasy festival, we have to give it a name and we have to go and book a venue for it. So Mr. Peck, what are you going to call your fantasy festival?
Well, for a few reasons, I thought this would be a great name for a festival. And I actually drove past this place when I was working in America a few years ago. Peckerville.
I like it. I like what you've done there.
Peckerville. The Peckerville Pest Festival. My guess is I'll get a lot of people turning up for that, not quite knowing what it's about. But just hoping.
So the Peckerville Festival. Simon, You can take us wherever you want. You can take us to Ellen Road. You can take us to the States. You can take us back to your old HMV haunts. Anywhere you want to go, we'll follow you to Peckerville. So where are you going to hold your fantasy festival?
I'm going to hold it at a place called Shibden Park in Halifax.
Okay. Why Shibden Park in Halifax? Well, I've actually been to Halifax before with Sally Wood. Took us to the Peace Hall that you mentioned earlier. So we've been there before in Halifax. But why are we going to Shibden Park?
Just because I can remember being a kid, and when we were really young, me and my metal mates, we used to always say this would be a great place for a festival. There's a lake at the bottom of a very steep hill up to the top where the actual hall is, and so we used to late night when everyone else has gone home with our bottle of woodpecker cider with 2 straws each, because apparently that gets you drunk quicker, I'm told, and 4 fags each from a packet of 20, and in fact 25, because we used to get the Rothmans that you got 25 in when we were kids. But yeah, there was a programme, Anne Lister owned it, and she was one of the first prominent and out gay women in that century, when it was all mills and it was unheard of for a lady of the manor, if you like. And she wrote a diary, and there's a great TV series on the BBC. That's Shibden Hall, and that's where I'd have my Fantastival.
Great stuff. All right, so we've got a name, we got a venue. Before we talk about your 5 acts, you've reeled off loads of amazing acts already. I imagine it was quite a difficult process getting down to the final 5.
It's difficult because when I first did it, I was like, it can be anyone, alive or dead, still performing or not. And in the end, I thought I'm going to have to whittle this down a bit. So I had to exclude anybody who's dead, which meant there was, therefore no place for Elvis and, no place for Michael Jackson, sadly, no place for David Bowie, very sadly. But you'll see when I get to it, I did have to include one person who's no longer with us, but there was no way of leaving him out. Yeah, ones that I didn't put in were that really should have been in for me. I saw Morrissey a couple of weeks ago, Doncaster Dome, and he's absolutely on fire. I've seen him quite a lot of times over the years. Never got to see the Smiths, but Morrissey was absolutely back at the top of his game a few weeks ago up there in Doncaster. Really, really great voice. Alan Sinclair's back on guitar. The sound's fabulous. The screams behind he just seemed happy in himself, really, and he put on a fabulous show. Best set list he's done ever as a solo act for me as well. So ones that didn't make it, the Killers didn't make it, Bowie didn't make it, the Clash didn't make it, the Smiths didn't make it, The Beat, I mentioned earlier, they didn't make it, Spirit of Destiny, who I've probably seen more times than anyone, didn't make it, Ice-T, Jay-Z, Kanye, Eminem didn't make it, LL Cool J didn't make it. But probably the biggest ones that didn't make it for me, and really, I thought when I'm putting it together, it needs to be acts that you get a certain kind of crowd. We touched on the Chase and Status crowd a short while ago, didn't we? And I thought the last time I saw the Stone Roses wasn't the reunion gigs. It was at Manchester Apollo on the Second Coming tour, and it was just out of this world. Not the best singer in the world even then. I know it's topical at the moment, but it was just fantastic to be there after all those waiting for that second album, after the love that I had for that first album. Still say it's probably my favourite debut album And looking back on it now, it's one of those things like, God, I'm so glad I got to see him then. And everyone who went to see the reunions was like, the crowd's not right. They're all a bit leery, and it didn't sound great. And certainly the people I know who saw him in the last couple of weeks, they've got a different view of it all now. But at that time, it was just incredible. A Joy Division, New Order, not made it, should have. And Oasis didn't make it, but they were, as you touched on, working in a record shop through the 90s. And I remember when Be Here Now came out, and I was manager of Liverpool, and the press were all over it, and we had photos of me with the security guard putting the CDs in the safe on the cover of the Liverpool Echo and stuff, and it was just a massive media frenzy. They did a really good job of selling that out. Unfortunately, it wasn't as good as any of their others, really. But looking back on it again, great, fantastic album. If you listen to it again now, think, God, this was pretty unfairly treated at the time. But I remember, before What's the Story came out, I remember I think I had to get my girlfriend at the time to read what it said in the NME, when they did a track by track what this song's about. I mentioned it to NT the other day about Cast No Shadow. Did you know it was about Richard Ashcroft from The Verve? And he was like, no. But that was from her reading out just before we'd even heard the songs on What's the Story. And I was manager of HM in Blackpool behind on Bankay Street behind the Tower at the time. That album came out, and it used to come out on a Monday in those days, obviously. And on the Sunday night before that album came out, they played Blackpool Winter Gardens, and it was just brilliant. I remember in the crowd of Oasis fans queuing up to get in the Winter Gardens to see Oasis, and the crowd started chanting Dame and Alban is a rhymes with banker pretty much for an hour before they got let into the gig. So it was but those were the days. So none of those made it anyway. So we go with openers?
Yeah, let's do it. So you've mentioned some fantastic acts who aren't going to get in to Peckerville, but I guess it's time to reveal the 5 who are. So 2:00, lovely day in Halifax. Time for your opening act, Simon. So who is going to open Peckerville?
The opening act for Peckerville is going to be a band called the Gaslight Anthem.
Oh, lovely stuff. First time the Gaslight Anthem have been picked. Great.
Yes.
Great choice, Mr. Peck. I had tickets to go and see them earlier this year, but I was on holiday, so I missed them.
Just reformed after a very long time, Steve.
Yeah, I was supposed to see them in August, but I was on my summer holidays, vacationing away, so I missed them, but I have seen them before. Great band, Mr. Peck. So why are they going to open Peckerville?
Just because I absolutely love them, and I got reminded of how much... When I go to see a band that I really love, I'll go on Setlist FM and I'll record those songs in the order of the most recent setlist and listen to it for a week or two, so I'm fully prepared. And I must admit, if anything, I was a little bit disappointed with the setlist that they picked for the gig, because there were, and then you're never going to win, but there were, it was Get Her heavy for me, that set list. I'm not slagging the guys off. Picked some of the openers at Peckerville, haven't I, for God's sake? But so because of that reason, set list wise, to make it easier for the guys, really, I've picked them to be my act that does a full album.
And what album are you going to have them play? I think I probably know what album you're going to go for, but what album are you going to have them play?
Well, right, have a guess.
Well, I would predict you would go for the... I'll get my album. So I'm going to get interactive here. So I've got 2 albums by them. I've got 59 Sound and I've got American Slang. You might throw a curveball and go neither and go for another album. Yeah,
do you know what? It switches with me. I go between these 3 albums, which one's my favourite, and it depends which one I listen to last. But I'd say Handwritten is probably my favourite at the minute, but that's not the album that I'm going to pick. It's going to be American Slang. But that doesn't mean they can't then also do an encore of 59 Sound, does it?
No, they can absolutely do that. I was lucky enough.
I'm in charge of Peckerville.
You are, so whatever you say goes, Mr. Peck. I was lucky enough to see them support Bruce at Hyde Park about 10 years ago, and
I saw them there. I was at that gig, Steve.
Oh, and they brought Bruce out to do the 59 Sounds.
Bruce out, and he couldn't remember the words, could he?
No, he knew the chorus, but didn't know the rest. Yeah,
he didn't know the words, but it was what a fantastic moment. But I think prior to that, we'd had to sit through a band that don't have many choruses. So was it the Dave Matthews Band before?
Yeah, I think they were on after.
No, they came on after. They came on after Gaslight. Yeah, but what a great day. And the boss started with London Calling, I think, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. Yeah, great show.
He did, yeah. What a great day. Well, I mean, listen, I absolutely love the Boss, and I think that's how I got into Gaslight Anthem, because I went through all that, all those bands that that took him as an inspiration, and and I don't mind Get Hurt, and I love maybe 4 or 5 of the songs. I just think American Slang, there isn't a song on it that I would skip.
Yeah.
And I think it'd be a hell of an opening band to open a nice day out in the sun in Shibden Park, Halifax.
Great shout. So Gaslight Anthem are opening Peckerville. They're going to play 2 till 3. They're going to play American Slang in full. We'll take a half-hour break, and that will take us to 3:30. So, Mr. Peck, who's going to be your Super Seconds act?
Right, funny one this. No longer available, and so I'm not a massive fan of cover bands, but I've been to see some guys who I'll tell you about in a minute. But so the Style Council, I had a very, very, very big Style Council phase just after my jam phase and prior to my metal phase. And I just love everything about Paul Weller. I love his face, his hair, his style, his class, his lyrics, his music, his experimentalism, his voice, his guitar playing, his anger, his socio-political standpoint, which has informed my own political views over the years ever since then. And so I absolutely adore the Style Council. And remember that I think they came on, were they on second at Live Aid in 85?
Yeah, I think you're right. There was a great
after Quo, yeah, and I just love Paul Weller, but I love the Style Council, and I would love to see them again. I think I probably saw them maybe 10 times when they were around, and every time was different, and it was just fantastic to see him, sometimes with a guitar, sometimes without a guitar. But I love the songs, I love the album covers, I love the words, the Cappuccino Kid sleeve notes, I love the whole look. It was a whole thing, and in the 80s, they were so apart from everything else, and you could see that when you look at, they recorded the first Do They Know It's Christmas version, and you just see him, and he just sticks out like a sore thumb in amongst everybody else. I remember him being interviewed afterwards and saying, yeah, it's a pretty shit song. Yeah, I'm not sure he meant to be saying that kind of thing, Paul, but, he just walks his own path. And I think the big reason for me as being a big Weller fan is always been, he's always been passionate, and he's always talked about a lot of other music. And when you work in a record shop and you think you know what you're talking about, and then you start working there, as touched on before, Steve, you're like, I bet I could have a conversation with that guy for a long time. And I have bumped into him a few times, and they say never meet your heroes. I think the first time was in something at Oxford Street, and I got to meet him backstage, and he's a bit like, offhandish, busy, and blah, blah, blah. Met him one time at the backstage at a gig in Liverpool that he did, and we were actually in the backstage, and we walked past him when he was in his huddle before they went on stage. I went, break a leg, man. And he went, yeah, thanks, man. And he looked and thought, who the fucking hell's he? Another time, bumped into Maida Vale tube station when I lived up there. He was on his way to town. I think I was going for a job interview after Woolworths went bust and I'd lost my job. I was going for a job interview in town. I had a sit down and a good chat with him about how, streamed music flattens the sound a bit. I asked him where he was going. He said, I'm off to see, I think did he say Booker T and the MGs? And I think I was trying to be clever and said something like, yeah, Donald Duck Dunn and that. And he went, no, he's dead. I went, all right. So not him then, but I was just trying to be clever. And then and when he got off, I said, nice shoes, man. He went, thanks, you've got nice shoes too. And that was it. It was off to the 100 Club to see Booker T and the MGs. But yeah, my hero, Style Council, brilliant band. Like every album that, even the albums that no one else likes, loved the Cost of Loving album, loved it to bits. But certainly some of my favourite ever songs, yeah. But I can't say a bad word about Paul Weller, and certainly would love to see the Style Council reform back. And that recent documentary that was on Sky is absolutely fantastic. The big surprise at the end when, the Steve White and Mick Tolbert and even DC Lee, his ex-missus, do a song from Confessions of a Pop Group, Very Deep Sea, together at the end of it. It's just a great moment for me. So, yeah. The Style Council are on second, as they were in 85 at Live Aid, following the Quo.
I like what you've done there. I watched that documentary, and that documentary is fantastic. It opened my eyes to a lot of the stuff the Style Council have done that I had no idea that they'd done. A great watch. I highly recommend that for anyone who's listening and hasn't watched that. It was a fantastic
Brilliant piece of work, that document. Fantastic.
Yeah, it certainly is. So Stoll Council, second time they've been picked. So you and Mark Butcher, the cricket player, both picked the Stoll Council. Yeah, Butcher was on about 2 years ago now. They were his opening act. You've picked them for their second act. So maybe we'll see.
Did he waffle on as much as me about them? Or
do you know what? He was very passionate about the Stoll Council as well. I think Stoll Council fans are very much, they know.
Oh, wait, if you see Martin Freeman talking about, if you mention the Stoll Council, Martin Freeman goes on for hours.
Yeah, he loves it. I think he was in that documentary as well, wasn't he? Or might be another one he's in.
Yeah. But it informs so much. You look at stuff like the Our Favourite Shop album cover, and you think, geez, this is just, another country. I've never seen that film. What's it about? And then you start thinking about the hierarchy in this country, and if you were born at school with a certain kind of tie and a blazer and what have you. But just fantastic stuff to get into that influenced by Paul Weller, really.
Yeah, a great man. So Stoll Council Super Seconds Act. They're going to play for half an hour in your Super Seconds Act. That will take us to 5 o'clock. It'll be time for your Midway Madness Act. So Simon, who's going to be your Midway Madness Act?
Well, I'm not going to bang on about him any longer now, because I think we've covered him, but it was going to be Paul Weller. Then I decided, no, it can be anyone I want, so I'm going to go with the Jam.
Very
nicely done. I can't be talking about how I'd love to see the Style Council reform and then not get the Jam reformed either, can I?
Fine. So, Jam, you've spoken a lot about Weller, you've spoken a lot about missing out on the Jam. I guess, why are they your Midway Madness Act?
Yeah, because I wasn't allowed to go because my mum wouldn't let me. That's really the only reason. She also said, over my dead body when I wanted to buy a scooter. So the first thing I did when I bought my own house and couldn't afford 2 cars in a young family was I bought myself a scooter. I used to go work on it every day at HMV Liverpool. And down the Scotty Road, the kids used to throw half-empty cans of pop at me and shout hairdryer and stuff at me or whatever, amongst other things. And, so want to see the Jam live. That's a good place to do it. Straight after the council, Weller gets half an hour to tidy himself up and put a black suit and a white shirt and a black skinny tie on and some black and white bowling shoes on before he comes back out as lead singer of the Jam. Yeah, so... absolutely brilliant, because it's one of them where when I was doing my DJing, weddings, bar mitzvahs and funerals stint for a while, after I'd left school for a bit of extra pocket money, used to do a bit of DJing back before DJs were cool in any way, shape or form. But any point in certainly the place venues I used to go to, at any point you put Going Underground, A Town Called Malice on, and people are up off their seats, young and old. And then followed by my little ska set that kept them on the dance floor, and then just be good to get people going, I thought, in the middle of the afternoon.
Yeah, certainly would. I can't believe it. I've had to check my notes on my Fantastival history. Paul Weller's been picked before as a solo artist. The Stoll Council have been picked before. The Jam have never ever been picked. They've been spoken about so much on this podcast, but you're the first person to ever pick the Jam for a fantasy festival lineup. But I can't quite believe the first time they've been picked. So
that's incredible. Podcast number 108 and the 108. First in the Jam.
And loads of people have spoken about seeing the Jam or just missing the Jam, and Weller comes up quite a bit, but no one's ever picked the Jam, so to speak. So you're making history right here tonight at the Fantastival.
Wow, because when I looked at my list, I thought, this is really not that cool, but I suppose if no one's picked Gaslight Anthem and no one's picked the Jam, I'm groundbreaking here.
Smashing it, as we say in the industry. So the Jam are going to play you Midway Madness slot, 5 till 6. It's going to be an incredible hour of music. We'll take one more half-hour break, and then it will be time for your pre-headline act, who are going to get an hour and a half to play from 6:30 to 8 o'clock. So who's going to have the task of following the Jam for your pre-headline?
So this is the one that I've alluded to. So in my life, when you say what sort of music do you like, I have I call them the Three Musketeers, and it's literally anything that's available to buy, watch, listen to, wear. I have to have it, and that's Paul Weller, Bruce Springsteen, and Prince. So my next pre-headline act is Prince.
Great shout. An act who has been picked a few times before. I mean, Prince, what a legend, right? So I guess for you, Prince, first question is why Prince? I guess the second one is he's only getting an hour and a half. So what are you going to try and get fit into the hour and a half by Prince? Because there's so much music out there. An hour and a half is like 2 seconds for him, basically.
There is, right? So the last time I saw him, I had tickets for the piano and microphone tour as well, which sadly didn't do, because such a sad story of the circumstances of his death. I mean, I guess it's never great dying, but I think Bowie probably had time to come to peace and come to terms with what was going to happen. I certainly don't think that was the case for Prince or even Michael Jackson or a lot of these guys. Elvis, you could say, Kurt Cobain. You know what I mean? I think you don't know, do you? But I just think dying on his own in Paisley Park, in the lift, in that manner, through, you know, effectively prescribed drugs, we're told. And that, you know, it's Russell Brand talks about a lot when I listen to his podcast, that this opiate crisis really just brought about by the greed of big pharmaceutical companies in it. And I just think that it's just such a sad story for someone who was such an incredible talent. And you look at the amount of material that he wrote and the amount of people that have been so influenced by him, and it's all those little things that come out, you know, when someone asks Eric Clapton, what's it feel like to be the best guitarist that ever lived, and he said, I don't know, ask Prince. And you think, geez, this is Eric Clapton, you know, and you just think he was such an influence. And it was all those things that sort of captured my imagination when I was young. I was still at school when Purple Rain came out, which was obviously the first time I could be cool and say, yeah, bought For You and bought Controversy the day it came out and Dirty Mind when it came out. But obviously that would be a lie, because pretty much no one in the UK did, apart from perhaps Phil Pepper, because he was a massive Prince fan.
I was just going to say Phil Pepper is springing to mind here, yeah.
And so the last ever gig I saw was the Third Eye Girl tour, and there's some great songs on Plectrum Electrum and the Third Eye Girl. I mean, I'm like, it was just a great set list. But I bet I've seen him 20, 25 times, maybe 30. Every time he toured in the UK, I saw him at least twice on every tour. So I'm guessing probably 20, 25 times I've seen him live, and he's difficult to surpass a Prince gig. Even the gigs when I remember going to see the Gold Experience in Manchester Arena and it was literally just songs from the Gold Experience. I remember there were only 2 or 3 previous songs when he toured Graffiti Bridge album. I went to him in Birmingham specifically on that tour, but I'd follow him around. I'd go and see him anywhere, and if I need something to listen to and I'm stuck for what to listen to in the car, which is fairly rare, to be honest, but I'll always find a Prince album. So set list wise, there'd be probably one song from Dirty Mind, even though that's in my top 5 Prince albums. There's probably 5 songs from Sign of the Times, you could probably name them. It'd be very hits heavy. When he did the 21 Nights, was it, at the O2, I did the first night, a night in the middle, and the last night, and every set list was very different. In fact, I think on one of those, it might even be the first night, he opened with Purple Rain. Now, who does that? That's a song that's got encore written all over it from the day it was written, hasn't it? And he literally opened with it. And I just think he's got that. There's that much material in it. And I'd love to be if he could play the Peckerville Festival in Shibden Park, Halifax. I'd absolutely love it if I could have a hand in the set list, because I know what I'd go with. And you know, When You Were Mine's one of my favourite ever songs of the earlier period. I love Controversy, the song, or Controversy, as he might say. And but you know, Ronnie Talk to Russia, that'd probably be in there from that album. Certainly, I'd get him to do I Feel For You, which I think he did on one of the nights at the O2. I'd get him to do probably 4 or 5 songs from Purple Rain, obviously. But I suppose my favourite album is probably Parade. So it'd be fairly Parade heavy. And that's because the first time I saw him must have been 1986, and that was the Parade tour. And we got on a coach trip with the local Bradford newspaper, me and a friend of mine. It took us about 7 hours to get to Wembley Arena, and he was doing 3 nights there. I think it was the second night we got to go there. We walked in and there were black and white, alternately, helium-filled balloons on every other seat as you walked into the place, because we were obviously there first on this mad coach trip, and it kicked in with the and it just went, the kick drum, he does the flares with his yellow flared suit on off the drum riser, at that time he was 40 years away from having 2 hips replaced, but just with the stilettos, he's just absolutely insane. Obviously, we'd watched the live videos that were available on VHS, the live in Syracuse, but so Prince, it'd be very easy to pick a set list for an hour and a half. I could pick a set list that went on for 4 hours, which is roughly the amount of time he played a lot of the time. But just fantastic, absolutely fantastic.
Great stuff. So Prince makes his 6th Fantastival appearance. Also, he's been picked by Mark Butcher as well. So you and Mark Butcher have got him for 2 of the same acts, unbelievably.
Got a bit in common.
Bit in common. Mike Grant, a name who I'm pretty sure you'll be familiar with.
Is there anybody in the world who's ever worked at HMV for any length of time who's not familiar with Mike?
Absolutely. So Mike Grant went through him in his pre-headline act as well. So
Prince... Mike Grant picked Prince, and I'm assuming his headline was The Clash. I've not listened to his podcast.
Yes, he went for The Clash, but a great podcast.
Was Joe Strummer the opener?
No.
Really?
He had Rammstein.
Really?
Yeah, he went Rammstein, Prince, The Clash, and the other 2 have gone from the top of my head.
Big Audio Dynamite, that's just a guess.
I'll find out now. It wasn't Big Audio Dynamite. I'll find out. I'll catch up with you after and let you know who Grant he picks. But Prince is back in the Fantastival, plays for an hour and a half. We'll take 1 more half-hour break, and it'll be time for your headline act, who's going to play from 8:30 to 11. Now, you mentioned a big 3. You've picked 2 of the big 3, so you may have given your headliner away, or possibly not.
Sorry, I have. when I was talking about it, I've got the 3 Musketeers, and the D'Artagnan in amongst those is obviously Bowie. But but it's not Bowie. You're right. It is the Boss, and again, only because what a headline act he is, if I thought who's going to be your headline act of your own festival, it'd either be Prince or the Boss, and they were kind of interchangeable in those 2 slots for quite a long time when I was putting this list together for you. But then I thought it's a longer slot, so it's probably got to be the Boss, because even at 70 or however old he is, 73 maybe, I don't even know how old he is anymore, but yeah, again, seen him maybe 2 or 3 times every tour that he's ever done in the UK, never seen him abroad, I don't think, but so again, maybe seen him 30, 40 times, I guess, something like that. And never ever fails. And set list wise, I think he's always been pretty respectful of his catalogue. He's always mixed it up a bit. He can pick and choose. The E Street Band's so tight, so incredible, and it's just a fantastic spectacle. So yeah, got to be the Boss. Anything
you're going to ask him to play or leave out of the set list? Because I've seen Bruce quite a lot of times as well, and sometimes his set list can go very, very deep or very hits heavy. Anything that you would want to hear him play?
Yeah, obviously the classics, and I love it when he does the acoustic version of Born in the USA, but I think at an outdoor festival it's got to be the bombastic, misappropriated version of Born in the USA. But yeah, no, anything really that he throws at me, I'll know it. I'll know every word to it. And but there's some songs that I remember vividly from every Boss gig I've ever been to, and it's usually stuff like Out in the Street, Darkness on the Edge of Town, at Thunder Road, obviously any version of it, because I think is, as Nick Hornby would say, the song that I've listened to every day of my life and always will as long as I live, because it's that good. And it really is. But there's some other stuff when you think, I've seen him do Jungle Land live when Clarence was still alive. I've seen him do Jungle Land with whatever he's called, the new saxophonist, Clarence.
Jake.
Isn't it? And it's just such a atmospheric, wonderful song. And the beauty of the Boss is, with the odd exception in terms of maybe a couple of songs on Nebraska, maybe a couple of songs on Devils and Dust, it's so Ghost of Tom Joad as well, so chorus heavy that it just suits a live environment and a festival environment especially, and everybody's singing along. So I'd want him to dig deep in that period of time, but I'd also want him to finish with the big obvious ones where and I just love all the stories about. I love the fact that he took the Born in the USA album, which ended up with 7 or 8 top 10 singles on it, and the guy at Sony said you need a single, So he went home and wrote Dancing in the Dark in 20 minutes or whatever the legend goes. And you just think he's some guy, and I think a lot of people misunderstand the songs that he's written, but there's songs that on albums that probably aren't as familiar to a lot of people. So Gypsy Biker from Magic album's one of my favourite songs. The last proper album, Letter to You, I thought was just a brilliant album, and I would say massive return to form, but I don't remember it being a poor album because I love the Western Skies album. The new one's interesting. I'm not sure about the videos that have been released so far, but when he does the Do I Love You?
Yeah.
The Northern Soul song. It's a great version. It's pretty much true to the original. But when I looked at the track listing last week, they released Night Shift, the Commodore song, and I thought, how's he going to play this one? It's a real interesting choice of soul song that for him to do, because I remember the Commodore's version and listening to it on a tape on my Walkman whilst I was doing the milk round at 5 a.m. when I was doing my O-levels, and I loved that song then. So, but yeah, the version's pretty good, and I don't think any of it's embarrassing in any way. So it'd be good for him to finish with a couple of those old soul songs from his new album, I think.
Great stuff. I'll be there. Looking forward to seeing him at Peckerville. So he'll play till 11 o'clock, and then at 11 o'clock he'll bring out Prince, The Jam, the Style Council, and the Gaslight Anthem. They'll all be on your stage, Mr. Peck, and you can tell them to play one song that they're all going to know how to play anyway. So what song are you going to have them play as your encore?
So this is a tough one, really, but I haven't mentioned the Arctic Monkeys at all, and I absolutely love the Arctic Monkeys. I've still not train spotted the new album. Also, did I mention Sinead O'Connor? Absolutely love Sinead O'Connor. Just watched the documentary, Nothing Compares. Fantastic. I love her. I love her with all my heart. So it was going to be, the Prince Nothing Compares to You version, or it was going to be, maybe I was going to do the Arctic Monkeys, Bet That You Look Good on the Dance Floor, because that would be funny to see Prince and the Boss trying to get away with that song. So, but it's not any of those. And then I thought maybe they could do a Smith song, and then thought maybe they could do a New Orleans song, and I thought, no, none of those. So I eventually settled on either They All Do Purple Rain, because I can see the lighters, I can see, but the Boss did it at a couple of gigs just after Prince had died, and my dad died last year. I never knew him, so don't worry about it. But he left me loads of guitars, and I've had guitars all my life and never bothered having I've never learned to play it. So I thought I might as well start to learn to play the guitar now, since my dad's left me 25 electric guitars. So and the only thing I wanted to learn was Purple Rain, the and then I got to the guitar solo bit and kind of gave up and started learning easier songs. But so it was going to be Purple Rain. But and then I thought, one song that I really, really love and sticks in my mind from when I was product director is by The Killers, and it's When You Were Young. And I know that album sounds very Springsteen orientated, and I thought, I've got The Boss, I've got Gaslight Anthem. I'm not sure what part the Jam and the Star Council and Paul Weller play in that song, but I can see Prince making a bit more of the guitar solo in When You Were Young, and I can see The Boss loving it. So yeah, maybe a verse each, maybe a chorus. Obviously, Prince playing the guitar solo. Yeah, they'll finish with The Killers, When You Were Young.
Love it. Great show.
I just thought there'd be a lot of people there who are kind of, if that's the lineup, they're probably going to be all people my age. So it's probably quite apt to finish on that one.
What a great way to end your fantasy festival. So let's lock it in before you change your mind. So we've got the Peckerville Festival taking place at Shibden Park in Halifax. In your opening act, we've got Gaslight Anthem. We're going to play American Slang in full. Super Seconds, the Style Council. Midway Madness, we've got The Jam. Pre-headline act, we've got Prince. And your headliner is going to be Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band. And for your encore, they're all going to play When You Were Young by The Killers. Mr. Peck, That sounds like a great fantasy festival to me. You happy to lock that one in?
I'm locking it in. It's fantastic. When are we going to start on the dance tent and the second stage? Do we do that tomorrow night?
Yeah, that's the follow-up. That's great stuff. So before we finish in, Simon, I guess what I always like to ask people what the future holds. What does the next 6 months to a year hold for Simon Peck? What's going to happen?
Hopefully, continue to do all right in the job that I think is the first job I've had for more than a year since Simon Fox got rid of me. I mean, since I left HMV. I think God bless him. I think to try and continue the business that we're working in now, which is juliancharles.co.uk, bedding fans everywhere, which is a great job, great place to work, great people, and I just hope I can do my best to continue to look after them, look after the business, and succeed at that. And then who knows? I always think there's no point planning too much, because these days, at some point, somebody's going to kick you in the testicles, Steve, at some point, aren't they? So being prepared for the kick in the testicles, that's what I'll be doing for the next 6 months.
Great stuff. And if anyone's listening and likes the sound of you and doesn't know you, you can be found right on Facebook. If anyone wants to go and friend you up, Simon Peck, anyone
absolutely,
like that?
Yeah, Facebook. My daughter, Emily M. Peck, on TikTok. 5 million views of her homecoming to the UK video. She lives in Australia now, but she came back over here for a few weeks ago. 5 million views of my daughter coming back to the UK and surprising me in the office at work. And that was partly Neil Taylor's fault, because she got in touch with him privately and told him what she was going to be doing. And yeah, amazing. What an amazing world.
It's incredible. It really is. So we'll put a link to that TikTok in the episode description as well. So if people want to go and find that and watch that, we'll put that in. That'll be good, because I'd like to see that as well.
No, it's brilliant. And you know, even if you don't like me, apologies. Even if you don't like me, you will probably feel some sort of emotion that's not hatred when you see that video, because it's a pretty emotional 5 or 6 seconds of your life watching my daughter come back from Australia after 3 years.
Yeah, great stuff. So that is it, everyone. Thanks for listening to the 108th episode of the Fantastival Podcast. If you've enjoyed this one and are listening for the first time, don't forget to subscribe if you're listening on iTunes, and rate and review the show. You can do the same as well on Spotify. And please remember to recommend the podcast to all your families and friends. The podcast is on Twitter, so make sure to give us a follow if you don't already, at FantastivalP. And you can email the podcast if you want at fantastivalpodcast@outlook.com. Unfortunately, we don't play music in this podcast, but I'll get some tracks from Simon. We'll make a nice little Spotify playlist of all the artists and the acts that he's chosen, and that'll be in the episode description. So 108, Simon, it's not disappointed at all. I've found it fabulous to talk to you. Really enjoyed your company. How have you found it being a guest on a podcast and talking about
Steve,
something you're passionate about?
I was a bit worried, and I just want to say thank you so much for having me, and I really enjoyed it. And you know, you're doing a fantastic job. I listened to quite a few of the older ones, and I just love it. It's just really interesting. So thanks so much for your time, Steve. I really enjoyed it. Again, likewise, great company, mate, and I hope you're successful. I hope HMV goes from strength to strength, as I always do and always have. It was most of my life, is what when people say what's HMV to you, I'm like, it was most of my life.
Great stuff. Like I said, really appreciate you coming on. So that is 108 done. I'll be back next week with episode number 109. So please make sure to join me. But until then, stay safe, my Fantastival friends. Please continue to spread the word. And that word is Fantastival. Thanks for listening.